I've been asked to share how I came to work in indigent defense. My name is Willey, and I'm a criminal defense attorney in Houston, Texas, working primarily public defense cases. When I went to law school, I had a tax accounting master's. I was all set up to become a tax corporate attorney, making big dollars in a corporate firm. That all changed the summer after my first year when I worked at a death penalty clinic. It was called the Texas Innocence Network. In my job, I primarily worked for one client, and my job was to fill out a clemency petition for him. A clemency petition is requesting the governor, at that time it was Governor Perry, giving reasons why Texas shouldn't execute him. Through the course of that work, I investigated the case, and there was a lot of alarming issues. To start, Mr. Wilson was mentally disabled, he's black, and he's poor. He couldn't afford a defense attorney. So I got to read the trial transcripts of his appointed counsel in his trial in Beaumont, Texas. I was appalled at how little they did for him, and the injustices that were put on him in this system to someone who was the most vulnerable in our system by every category. As I investigated the case, I to this day still believe he was innocent. There were a lot of claims that just brought up questions that were never answered. There was DNA that was never tested. In the victim's hand, who was a police snitch, it was claimed that there was a tuft of Caucasian hair. And I don't just mean a couple of hairs. It was a full-on tuft of hair that never got tested because the state's theory was that all people present on the scene were black, and it was Caucasian hair. Now, a few months after the trial, a few police officers were actually indicted in stealing drugs from the property room. It was later found out that these officers were actually suspected of actually killing the victim that Marvin was ultimately convicted of killing. Independent witnesses corroborated that. They said these police officers were trying to get in the drug game, which Marvin was involved in. I even spoke with the supposed drug lord of Beaumont at the time. She was an older lady named Beverly. Very sweet lady, but she, adamantly believed that Marvin didn't commit this crime, thought it was these police officers. But nobody investigated it. Nobody allowed us to test the DNA against these police officers. In addition, while I was on the case, another witness came out and said that they knew who the real killer was. There was a hearing held in Beaumont. They had appointed counsel in Beaumont as well. We weren't able to be involved in that. And they denied those claims, said he wasn't credible. In addition, he had a claim in the Supreme Court that he was too mentally disabled to be executed. Texas, which thankfully just reversed these rules, but they were allowed to have their own definition of mentally disabled. So again, if he was able to carry out this crime according to the state's theory, then he couldn't have been mentally disabled, so of course we're allowed to execute him. Very circular reasoning, which thankfully isn't allowed anymore. But more importantly was the man that Marvin Wilson was. The man I got to know was a truly redeemed man. He was a truly soft, gentle, loving man. He cared for his kids. He cared for his grandkids. Every person we talked to in Beaumont, his family, just talked about the heart he had and how he shielded everyone from any misgivings that he had. Being mentally disabled, he was teased as a kid, and he made life his own. He did the only thing he could. He tried to hold jobs. The jobs turned him away. So he had to turn to a life of crime. But he never let that get to his family. Speaking to his son over the phone near the end of our representation, his son told me, my kids, Marvin's grandchildren, will never know a life of crime because of the influence Marvin has had. And he wanted Marvin to continue to have this influence on his children. But Texas was threatening that. So we had a couple claims. We had the clemency petition to the governor. We had the Supreme Court mentally ill claim. And we had a claim to the Texas highest court, Criminal Court of Appeals, asking to test the DNA from that tuft of hair. Texas sets its executions at sundown. I'm not sure why. I guess just to be super creepy about it. On the day that his execution was set, it was towards the end of the summer and the end of my internship. We found out in the middle of the afternoon that the CCA had denied our claims to test the DNA from the tuft of hair. We found out a couple hours later that the clemency petition that I had worked on, which actually much of his story was cut out because of legal claims, which broke my heart because Marvin's story truly never got told. But we found out that we had lost the clemency petition. They had denied it. So the governor and the CCA in Texas said the execution could go forward. Right around 5 o'clock, we heard from the Supreme Court. We got a call and said Texas's rules on their definition of mentally disabled is allowed and the execution can go forward. So luckily, I made the better decision to go to Bible study instead of the bar because I was in pain. That day, I had also fasted, partly to honor Marvin, and partly I had a friend who was fasting through Ramadan, and just to satisfy her challenge, I just wanted to, honor Marvin in this way. Ramadan fast ends at sundown. So as the sun was going down in Texas, I knew Marvin was being executed, and I was coming off a fast. I started shoving these chocolate chip cookies that a friend had brought to the Bible study in my mouth because I was starving. In that very moment, someone was giving a testimony, unrelated, but they read a verse. It was Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. My mouth dropped, and from that moment on, I knew my life was going to be devoted to indigent defense. God opened up some doors. He brought me to Gideon's promise, where I've been enabled to practice the way I want to. I keep a picture frame of Marvin next to my desk for encouragement. It's got his last statement and his dates of execution on it, and that Bible verse. I know people like Marvin, racial minorities, the mentally ill, and the poor all get trampled by our system. And Gideon's promise has allowed me to be a voice to stop that. And we can be a voice for the voiceless if we continue the fight. So thank you to all my brothers and sisters and Gideons out there. And I hope more of you come. And I hope y'all continue to donate to Gideons for this amazing blessing that they are to this world. Thank you.